Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Emergent Leadership. I am your hostess, Brett Lyle, and I am with CEO of Thorne Ambulance with me today. Thanks for being with me today, Ryan. How are you?
I'm doing great. How about yourself?
I'm well, thank you. So, kind of the name of the game of our podcast. It's really focused on leadership. So I wanted to bring you on today. Obviously, by title, you're CEO of a private ambulance company up in Greenville, South Carolina. But I want to talk to you about your story and how you got there and some of the challenges and lessons learned too. So Ryan, will you just tell us a little bit for those of my listeners who don't know you already? How did you kind of get to where you are today? How did you find your path to leadership?
Definitely. So I became an EMT when I was 19 years old in Boston, Massachusetts. So I got some great experience up there. Worked for a private ambulance service that did both 911 and interfacility transports. So great experience. And then when I moved to South Carolina, I had a lot of what I consider negative run-ins with private ambulance services. And I started to see some of the negative stereotypes about the private ambulance industry and really aimed to do something about that. And so at 22 years old, I know I was very young and still relatively inexperienced, but I had a few years of field work behind me and as a paramedic. And I decided that it was time for me to try to take the vision that I had for EMS and really go out there and do my own thing and really create something that was going to be patient-centered and would bring value and add value to the community and the providers that work for the organization.
At 22.
Yes. Yes, and it was a bit of a challenge. So when people think, how did you have the funds to do that? How did you start an ambulance service? And so the first thing I did was I did go to the bank, and I got laughed out of there. They treated me like a kid trying to open a lemonade stand, and it just it didn't matter the data that I presented, the financial projections that I had a whole market analysis, and it did not matter. So the next step that I took, and then probably the more difficult one, was I actually sat down with my father at the kitchen table. And it was probably the hardest sales pitch to this day that I have made, because my dad has the unique ability to look at me as a business partner and not his son, and treats me accordingly. And so I had to really sell the notion that Thorne Ambulance Service, that this could actually work. And to this date, I always tell everybody, to this date, the loan that I took from him is the highest interest rate loan that I've ever had since we opened the company.
Well, I'm sure you come up against that. So it's Thorne Ambulance. Obviously, Thorne's your last name.
Yes.
So I'm sure that's a conversation you have more regularly. I actually can kind of share in some of that. I myself got into EMS. My mother had been in the industry for 20 something years and worked for the largest ambulance company. And when I graduated, I was determined, because nothing had ever been handed to me, that I was not going to be up against that stereotype that it was because of mommy or it's daddy who got you there. And so I definitely can relate to that experience, and it's an interesting one. But so how do you still feel that as you go about your day to day? So that was obviously 11 years ago. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah. 11. The company's been around 10 years. So about 11 years ago is when we were having this discussion. Yes.
Sure. So you did something right. Somebody made a good investment in you, and I think you made probably a lot of good investments in yourself.
Sure.
So I'm curious to know, because at 22, I think a lot of people would push and say, how can you have a vision at 22? Where did that inspiration, where did that vision come from that you were so motivated to say, now's my chance and I got to do this now, even if I'm up against the odds of people looking at me like I'm a 22-year-old kid with a lemonade stand?
Right. So there are actually two groups that I kind of look at. So I look at my parents, the way that I was raised, the way that business value, just values in general were instilled in me growing up. I remember, I think I was 12 years old, and I read a book called How to Become CEO that my dad had, and I just found it on the bookshelf, and I loved it. It was a simple read, but it told you everything you need to do to become a CEO.
Sure.
And then the other one was, I had a teacher by the name of Mrs. D'Onofrio. She actually just retired this year. And she was an incredible teacher, taught about, she had an entrepreneurship class, personal finance class.
Wow.
So I felt like even in high school, I was given a great deal of business instruction and education. And so a lot of people look at me and they say, well, where did you go to college? And I'm like, well, I went to Northeastern University for my EMT, but I've I've yet to go back and get a degree. I've been so focused on working and building the company, but that's, I think, where I got the initial, the instruction and knowledge to know that I had the capability to do it. And then I just have always been an incredibly motivated person. I love to work, probably a workaholic at times. That's something I'm working on this year, my work-life balance. But I'm just highly motivated, and I saw a real opportunity to really change the stereotype of the industry. And that's what I feel like our organization's done in the last 10 years.
Sure. That's incredible. And I just finished up a Tony Robbins 7-day challenge, and I've obviously read a ton of books, and I quote Maxwell pretty regularly, but there's a handful of people who have shaped what business coaching looks like and what life coaching looks like. And I think there's something to be said for people who read. And so it's incredible to me that you read a book at 12 years old in some of the really formative years, and then again had that solidified in high school. I don't know that that's common, that people have a teacher in high school who teaches those type of life skills and business skills. So it seems you are fortunate in that way. But it's interesting because you're telling me, you kind of self-educated and are running a business and haven't gone through the formal education part. Tell me your thoughts on that.
So I think there's a couple of ways to look at education. I mean, obviously there's the traditional path of college education and masters and moving on from there. But the other thing is, I don't ever think that you stop learning. I think if you push yourself and challenge yourself, there's so much great reading. I know you mentioned John Maxwell, Tony Robbins. They've got some incredible books out there that have taught me so much about leadership. And I've been able to put into practice many of the things that they teach about and present about. And so I don't think that people who either feel they can't go to college or maybe financially are unable to do it, that should not be your limiting factor. You need to pick up a book, go to a library. I mean, that's free. You can do these things and it doesn't cost you anything, and do your own research, do your own reading. And I think another big thing is to find a mentor. And it doesn't even have to be somebody necessarily in the industry you want to be in. I mean, that's obviously great. If you have someone you can look up to who will instill the work ethic principles, the value system, I mean, all of that together, coupled with the reading that you can do on your own and the research that you can do, you can really teach yourself an awful lot about business or, quite frankly, anything.
Right. So yeah, mentorship, man, I'd love to dive into that. Did you have a mentor? Obviously your father played a big role in, establishing the organization. Did you have a big mentor along the way that really motivated, inspired you, or taught you any really great lessons?
Well, I had a couple. I had good mentors and I had bad mentors. I had supervisors, especially on the EMS side of it. So when I've worked for county, hospital, and private services, I had some really great supervisors who I looked up to. I paid attention to the way that they not only communicated verbally, but their written communication skills. And I saw the way that their crew members, their field personnel responded to them. And I really paid careful attention to that, because I think one of the biggest things about leadership is truly communication and effective communication. And that can be good effect or bad effect. And so I think I learned a lot from the supervisors that I've had over the years. And again, sometimes in a bad case, where I know I worked for a supervisor once where I brought some suggestions and I felt I did it in a professional way to say, hey, I think these are some things we could do to really increase, workforce engagement. And the gentleman literally looked at me and said, well, if you think you can do it better, why don't you go start your own?
And you said, sign me up. That's interesting. Words are so powerful. And, again, I'm just got through this Tony Robbins thing, and it's just something I really believe strongly in, is that, he says that decisions, you never leave the scene of a decision without a commitment and an action, and putting timelines around that. And it sounds like that conversation, while I'm sure in the moment it felt uncomfortable at best, offensive, maybe the word is, enraging and all the bad words, right? All the bad emotion, anger words. It sounds like it really was a turning point for you mentally to say, maybe I will.
It was inspiring, actually. It was, well, wait a minute, because what I had done was I had talked to my peers, and for whatever reason, they came to me and said, these are all the issues with work. These are the things that if we had this or did that, I think this would be better. And I thought they were great ideas. And so I kind of formulated, basically an agenda, if you will, and presented them. And instead of hearing out the concerns of the team, it was, well, no, this is how we do it. We don't want to make anything better. This is how we're going to continue to do it. And if you think you can do it better, do it yourself. And so what I ended up doing was, when I created the business plan, I actually used a lot of the suggestions that were given to me to pass on to management as kind of the framework for how we would create a workforce or a workplace culture. And I think that is such that, and I'm not trying to go in too many different directions, but within leadership, as an entrepreneur, workplace culture is one of the number one things that we have to have in place. Because we all know happy team members equate to happy customers. And so that's where we put a tremendous amount of our focus is on our people. And we know if we take care of them, one, they're going to continue to be candid, transparent with us and help us, create the changes that we need to see. But number two, they're going to take care of the very people that help us keep the lights on.
Mm-hmm. No, you're right. And so it's interesting. I think, I would be curious to know, how have you taken those practices that are things that you learned through your experiences and implemented them in your organization today? How do you connect with your frontline field? How do you make sure that you're still getting that impact and staying connected to them and the ideas and doing that at an executive level leadership?
So there's a couple ways that's done. One of the easiest ways is through social media. And
Right.
so being, and I know different managers, leaders have different perspectives on whether or not they should be friends with people on social media and stay connected. But I think it's actually important to know a little something about everybody that works for you. I think you have a better understanding of their perspective and the way that they're going to look at how an organization responds to a challenge, or when we implement a new policy, different people are going to be impacted differently. And I think you need to have a good idea and an understanding of those various perspectives that exist within your company. And I've noticed the larger our organization gets, the more perspectives we have. And so the more inclusive we have to be when we make decisions, and the more informed we have to be when making those calls. And the other thing too is I remain a certified and nationally registered paramedic. I don't work the truck nearly as much as I used to, but for the first 5 years that we were open, I pretty much worked in the field every single day. And so I think that has given me an opportunity to remain close with our field providers, because I've never been too far away from the field to be relatable, to be able to relate to what they're doing. Probably more so now, but I still try to remain as engaged as possible, because I do think that plays into the workplace culture.
Sure. So I'm sure a lot of our listeners are hearing this and they're like, all right, you started a company at 22, you're 33, I'll say the M word, right? We're of the millennial generation. I told you I wasn't going to say it because it's become, for so long, it was like a taboo. Yeah, it was a bad word, right? We millennials were fighting against this notion that we're entitled and that we don't get it and all we care about is ourselves and all that. And so it's interesting to hear, your perspective as a leader and, who is a millennial, who is not just stepping into that role. I think there's a lot of millennials right now who are moving into senior leadership roles and still kind of getting there, right? So you're there, you've been there. You mentioned social media. I think it would be easy for people to say, well, Ryan, easy for you to say to do social media because you get it, that's your thing, you're a millennial, right? Do you think that there's, can somebody who's not technology savvy or somebody who doesn't come naturally to, I think you and I mean, we're on a video now, this is very comfortable for me. A lot of people that I talk to were like, oh my gosh, getting on a video, how intimidating. How do you build that confidence to just jump on social media and know that platform puts you in front of, how many employees do you have, Ryan?
75 full-time. Yeah,
so it puts you in front of 75, 100 people, or maybe a larger organization, hundreds of people, thousands of people. Tell me about that process. Did you just dive right in and do it, or was this a learned process of comfort?
So because of my millennial background, I did just jump in and do it. But what I would suggest, so I have an 11-year-old daughter. Her name's Chloe. And she teaches me so much about technology and what they're teaching the kids in schools, and just what she can figure out on her own is unbelievable. And she has actually helped me with some of the presentations that I've done. She's come up with some really great ideas for me that I've actually used. And so at 10 years old, I think she was 10 at the time, she gave me something to put at the end of a presentation. That was the biggest hit. It was a bunch of hands with the names of every staff, every team member in it, making a circle with our logo in it. I mean, it was the coolest thing. And it was my 10-year-old daughter who did that. And so my recommendation would be for people who are outside of the millennial, another generation that is not so tech savvy, start at home. ask your kids, ask your grandkids, learn from them. It's not as intimidating when you're asking a kid how to use the internet or how to use social media. So I think that is a real opportunity for people, and a point of comfortability that they can start at home. And then also in your workplace, pick somebody that you work with that might be a millennial or who may be a little more tech savvy, and have them help you and guide you. And I've also noticed, during this time of everything going kind of virtual, there are a lot more free class offerings on how to use these things. I think LinkedIn's been a big one I've seen. There's been a lot of videos on how to properly use that, how to position yourself to be effective in social media land. And so the opportunities are out there. You just have to have the desire and the willingness to venture into the unknown.
Sure. No, and that's a great point. I think there's a lot of LinkedIn learning is what I believe the application is. And,
Yes.
and there's a lot of this, free content out there. Coaches and professionals, especially right now in the middle of COVID and a lot of work from home and remote roles that people have not been in otherwise, people are getting creative. And now people have more, well, some people, obviously not EMS people, don't have more time now than ever. So sidebar, thank you for taking the time to talk to me. But when people have the time, and it's really not about even necessarily having the time, it's prioritizing it and finding the time, because we all have the same 24 hours. So really figuring out, hey, if I can't dive into an MBA program or an undergrad, or the program I'm interested in doesn't do an online course, how can you find other ways to get to the same goal? And it sounds like you've had that drive in you since a very young age. I'm curious, Ryan, do you still run up against maybe your employees or outside kind of that age challenge, that who are you or how do you know what you know kind of mentality even today after 10 years of running a successful business?
So not any longer. And what it took was we tackled our first large venue contract to do event standbys for some of the largest, musicians, artists, and whatnot coming to town. That was our first big step. And then when we landed our first big hospital contract, I haven't heard a word about my age since we did that. So sometimes I think that the key becomes, and I'll probably speak to this later on too, is resilience. You've got to remain resilient. You've got to stay focused on what you've established as your vision. You've got to surround yourself with incredible people, and you just got to keep driving forward and not let anything stop you. I mean, you're going to have naysayers along the way. And quite honestly, the more successful you are, the more you're going to have that are trying to say you can't do something, or maybe it's a fluke or this or that. And so that actually provides me the challenge and the opportunity to continue to find that drive, to keep moving forward and keep progressing and looking for that next opportunity and that next big thing.
Right. Well, those beliefs, those sometimes limiting beliefs, right? I'm only this old, or I've only been doing this for 10 years. When we're in a world, and I share the same sentiment, I can't tell you how excited I was on my 30th birthday. And as a woman, I had spent my 20s trying to convince people, because I was in a leadership role very young as well. And being in the industry, I'm not a clinician. I am college educated, but I came into it entry level and worked my way entry level to manager to director. And, I was doing very well. I was at a director level by 30. And I was so tired of being asked how old I was that I just would tell people, it's funny because usually in the women, in my world, in the female experience, it's, you don't want to tell people how old you are because you're older than you want them to. I didn't never lied about it, but I wanted to just be older than I was, because
like the kind of life you want to be.
Right. Because and maybe that's a privilege or maybe not, but I think that a lot of the reasons and a lot of the ways that I learned were a product of being how old I was. And so being in a space where you can accept where you are in life as the stage that you're supposed to be in is your power. And so to be able to say, hey, I'm great at social media because I just do it. Because yes, I'm afraid, but that's the definition of courageous, right? Doing it anyway. So
right.
If you're not afraid of it, it's not courageous. But stepping into that, so I'll tell you, when I turned 30, I couldn't wait to tell everybody that I was now in my 30s, and that had to be the sufficient answer. So they could assume I was 39 if they wanted.
Right.
I'm currently 33, and I'm very proud of that. It's 33 years of experience, and it sounds like you're the same way. That it's.
I am. I try to grow a little facial hair because I still look like I'm 16 years old. So I try to cover it up well where I can, and Yeah, but sometimes that helps, sometimes it doesn't. But I think track record is a big thing. And I'll also say, when I first started the company at 22, I went around, I was dressed, my tie on and everything. I was trying to get all this business and these opportunities, and nobody took me seriously. So I stopped going in business attire and started dressing like a paramedic. I wore a uniform, and I was Ryan, a paramedic with this company. And they didn't, at that point, they assumed there was an ownership group or something down the road, maybe, who were much older, much more experienced. And so I just took on a different, basically a different mask, if you will, within the organization. And I felt I was better received as a 22-year-old paramedic than I was a 22-year-old CEO.
Interesting, isn't it?
Yes.
Interesting. So I think, obviously, there are others who are listening today who are like, I'm on a path to leadership. Sounds hard, sounds difficult. You mentioned resilience. Have you found any specific tools or any tips that you can offer specifically for that? How do you develop that thick skin, or is that the goal?
I don't even necessarily say thick skin. Because you do have to have thick skin to a degree, but you don't want to become completely emotionless or unaffected by anything. So that's been a challenge. And as a paramedic, I think that's been a bit of a challenge too, because you basically generate thick skin just by being exposed to so much, so many of the horrendous things that happen out there. But it comes back to, a lot of it is keeping things in perspective, first of all. And secondly, really doing a lot of reading. Going back to talking about John Maxwell, Tony Robbins, a lot of those great writers, they always speak through a lens of positivity. And so you've got to continuously be putting that good stuff in your mind. And the other thing is, you've got to surround yourself with positive, like-minded people. If you've got a group of people that you spend a lot of time with who are negative, you are absolutely going to be that. And I use the example of being on an ambulance all day. If you're on a 12 or 24-hour shift and you've got a partner who's absolutely miserable, I don't care how positive you are, by the time you get to the end of your shift, you're also going to be miserable, because people who are miserable or pessimistic, they're taking the path of least resistance, and it's easy to slip into that. And so it's so important that you focus on the people that you spend your time with, and those that you look up to as mentors, because otherwise you're going to become the sum of those, some of the average around you.
Right. Well, and that's something that is so prevalent in the industry, and for a lot of reasons, reasons, not excuses. People struggle with burnout. People, the desensitization, is that a word? Desensitizing. Yes, they become desensitized to a lot of the really tough things that, we're not allowed to talk about in the civilian world, or it's this dark humor that develops. There's a lot of coping mechanisms that happen in the industry. That's why I wanted to have this podcast, to be very honest. It's because we need a network. And you mentioned, your father being supportive of your entrepreneurial spirit and your ventures. But it's important that not just to get you there, because I will say, having a network that is powerful in the way of the relationship has served me so well in my career. And I'm sure you could say the same. But it's not just about how to get you there. It's about, once you're there, leadership is hard. There's a lot of struggles and challenges that come with it. And so a lot of my intention of this podcast is, let's connect like-minded individuals. You don't have to be, as you've clearly shown through your story and experience, you don't have to be a leader by title. You don't have to be the CEO of a company to lead. And finding that value, or I guess I should say valuing the communication that you receive and the transmission of information that others bring to you, what you do with that is what makes you a leader or not.
Correct.
So having those networks. So Ryan, I'm really appreciative of your time today. If someone wants to continue the conversation with you, if they're interested in Thorne Ambulance in South Carolina or wherever in the world they are, how do they continue the conversation with you?
LinkedIn is the best. LinkedIn is the easiest. I'm on it. I monitor pretty regularly, so messaging through LinkedIn is great. And then my email address simply is rthorne@thorneambulance.com. I'm always on email, always connected. So I will certainly would love to engage in conversation with anybody who's interested, and always looking to build a more positive network, for sure.
Perfect. Well, I appreciate your time, definitely. I know you're a busy man. But I want to leave our audience, you've left us a lot of great tips. If 33-year-old Ryan went back to 22-year-old Ryan and the frame of leadership, what would you tell him? What words of encouragement or advice would you offer?
I would just say keep pushing and never, ever, ever give up, because it's a tough road. It's an uphill climb, but it is well worth the fight. And when you come out on the other side, it's amazing who you become as an individual and what you can accomplish with your team.
I love that. So powerful. Ryan, thank you again for your time. And I'm sure we'll talk to you soon.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Ryan.